Hey everyone, welcome to webinar number, I believe this is 4, including the first What is Scout tutorial. Other than that, this is basically episode 3 of the webinars. So this topic is near and dear to me because this is basically what started it all. When I was running my own store, it was the abandoned checkouts problem that was bothering me the most, that I spent most of my time trying to solve. And so this is probably the thing that I feel like I know the most about out of anything that we talk about. And so I'm excited about this one because, again, this is the genesis for Scout. Scout was created to basically solve this problem. Now Scout solves more than just this problem, but it was created out of this, and I'll explain basically what happened and how that is. So this will be about 15 minutes. The agenda is basically, I'm going to start off just by explaining the difference between what an abandoned cart is and what an abandoned checkout is, because a lot of people confuse those two and think that Scout isn't working because they're thinking about abandoned carts, but really Scout is about abandoned checkouts. So I'll explain the difference there. Next up, I'm going to be running basically the example of abandoned checkouts as a sports analogy. So basically, recovering an abandoned checkout or stopping an abandoned checkout is like being on defense. So I'll be talking about that analogy of running the defense analogy. And then how do we stop future abandons? We'll talk about that next. And then we'll end it off, as we usually do, with the next week's webinar topics. Cool. So first of all, what's the difference between abandoned cart and an abandoned checkout? Basically, an abandoned cart is just where somebody has clicked that button, add to cart or buy. They've just basically clicked the button, that's it. They haven't typed in any of their information. They haven't committed anything. All they've done is created a cart. That's it. People think that that's like, you can't really action on that because they haven't left any information. An abandoned checkout is like an abandoned cart, except the customer has filled in their personal details, filled in their shipping details, and may or may not have even filled out their credit card details. So these are customers that are more valuable because now you can action on these customers because they've left some information for you, like an email address, a phone number, something that you can reach out. So the significance here is really important to know the difference, is because an abandoned cart is hard to action. An abandoned checkout is much, much easier to action because you have the information. So we're going to be talking about this from an abandoned checkout perspective, not an abandoned cart perspective per se. Obviously, the same principles do apply somewhat, but the focus will be on abandoned checkouts. It's important because the significance here is that they're more valuable because they've shown more intent, right? Because they've taken the time to fill out their personal details and fill out their shipping details and things like that, they've already kind of committed, or they've shown that they have a commitment or interest to buy, right? They wouldn't fill in those things and they wouldn't take 5 minutes out of their day to fill in all that information if they didn't need the product or at least want the product. So that's why it's more important to focus on these abandoned checkouts, because they are more likely to convert if you do reach out with the right kind of conversations. And again, all of this was really what built Scout. So we're going to make the analogy of sports, whether you want to think of this as soccer or basketball or football, whatever it is, rugby. Think of it as you have two opposing teams scoring on the other's net or end zone or field goal or net or basket, versus you trying to make the sale on this side, right? So that's what you want. Your customers might abandon, right? And they might be trying to get into that end zone. So these teal, green, blue circles are basically excuses or reasons why somebody would abandon. And your X's here are on your side, and these are your tactics and your responses to stop the abandoned cart from happening. So that's your defense. That's your defensive play. Okay. So start here, right? You have two teams with the goal of getting to the other side. The goal of defense here is to stop that from happening. You don't want these guys to come into your end zone. You don't want them going to abandoned checkout. You want to stop them. And so let's talk about that. But before we do that, let's first look at what some of these reasons might be why somebody would abandon their checkout. Again, these are very different, right? This is why we build Scout, because people assume that there's only 1 or 2 reasons why somebody abandoned their checkout, or in this case is, let's say, 4 reasons why somebody abandoned checkout. But really there's a lot more than just 4 reasons. These are just the most common ones that you might find, right? Obviously it might be, oh, it's too expensive, I can't afford it. That's obviously one reason. Another reason might be, I was on my mobile phone and the website wasn't very easy to navigate on mobile, couldn't find what I needed, so I just kind of X'd out and closed it. Another thing could be shipping time. How long is all of this going to take to get to me? It's not clear. You know what? Forget it. I won't buy it. And then finally, what will I receive? What's actually in the packaging? What parts are included? Am I going to get that part? Are batteries included or not included? Or basically that whole thing. What am I actually going to be getting? These are basically, or like even like return policy. What's the return policy? That could be part of this question here as well. So these are all reasons people know, and you can expect people to know that. And so basically, most businesses, or at least good businesses, will have some answers to some of these questions already. So as a response to the, is it too expensive? You have the discount here, right? So you stop that, so you can stop that from being a reason. If someone thinks it's too expensive and they abandon, you can offer a discount in one of the auto emails. Again, you don't want to do that too much, but you want to let them know that there's offers there so that you can bring them back and recover that sale eventually, even if it's like 6 months later, right? Make sure that, that price isn't really an issue. If it's obviously you don't want to lose money on it, but to let, maybe a discount will work. On responsive, so making your website responsive, making your website mobile friendly, right? I think a couple of years ago was the first time ever where mobile sales overtook desktop sales. So it is likely that you're making most of your sales on mobile. So if your site isn't already mobile friendly, then a lot of the abandoned checkouts might be for that reason. A lot of abandoned carts, at least, might be for that reason. So you want to have a mobile first website. That's another main one. Shipping time. So a lot of people will just not buy because there's no transparency. Like, I live in Toronto, but the store is located in Vancouver. How long is that going to take? It might take too long, so forget it. I'm not going to do it. At the very least, let them know. Even if it is a long waiting period, let them know, hey, it could take 5 to 7 business days. Just make it clear so that they know what to expect. That's really helpful. Another one is what will exactly I receive? Again, a way that you might reply to that or respond to that is the unboxing video. On your product page, it might be that you make a video of somebody unboxing the product, so they know exactly what they're going to be getting. So these are all ways that you can recover these sales. But again, going back to the main thing, and which is kind of what I've listed here, is that personal call or that personal contact, because it's only when you create that two-way conversation do you understand where you're even losing things. So you might not know, like maybe this whole thing, what will I receive? You might think that your customer knows exactly what they're getting because your pictures were nice and clear and anything like that, but who knows? Maybe 5% of all of your total abandoned checkouts were because those people had that thought of, I don't know exactly what I'm going to be getting. And so to stop that leak of those 5%, to stop those 5% of abandons from happening, if you knew about it, you can solve it proactively by not letting it be abandoned in the first place. Right? The analogy that I always make is, what's better than abandoned checkout? What's better than recovering an abandoned checkout? It's recovering it, but then also making sure that the next time for that same reason, somebody else doesn't abandon it, right? That's the best option that you want to go for. An auto email campaign won't achieve that. An auto email campaign might bring that back and might recover some of those customers, but it's not going to stop the next customer for abandoning for the same reason, right? Why let them abandon? Don't let them abandon. If you know what they're going to abandon for, be proactive and stop it from happening again for other customers, right? So this is really interesting here, right? Because these two question marks I put on purpose, and that is that you can't stop a player from reaching your goal if you can't see them. If they have invisible players, then you're going to lose, right? You want to be able to see all of their players. If you couldn't see their players, you can't, and they have the ball, you can't stop them, and you're going to lose. So that's why it's important to have that personal phone call, as I was saying before, because that personal phone call is going to make that invisible player visible for you, right? If, let's say, 12% of all your abandoned checkouts are happening for some reason that you don't know, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you call that customer and ask them what was it that went wrong or what feedback they have for your store, and they tell you something that you didn't know, should be a really eye-opening moment for you to tell you that this is something that's potentially losing you many more sales. So let's fix this. In my case, for my business where I'm selling bidets, is a lot of customers, I didn't even know this, but a lot of customers were abandoning for the reason of that they wanted the hot and cold water bidet, not just the cold water one, because they lived in a cold environment, cold climate. In Canada, it's cold. And so in the winters, they didn't want really cold water. They wanted a way to bring hot water into it. Now, I sold that product. It was on my site, but I guess it was hard to find. So a lot of my customers were abandoning, and when I would call them, they would say, oh, it's because I need the hot water one. I'm not sure if you have that. That's why I abandoned it. I told them, actually, we have it. It's on the third page. Let me send you a link. So I would send them the link and they'd buy it. After a couple of times of that happening, I realized, man, this is happening way too often. It could be that 10% of all my lost sales are because of this problem. Okay, let me make my hot water product more featured on the homepage, which I did. And it turned that reason stopped happening. My average order value actually went up because it turns out other people also wanted that product. So again, it was something that I didn't know. And if I didn't know it, how am I supposed to tackle it? How am I supposed to defend against something I can't see? So the idea of creating that personal conversation, that one-on-one, two-way conversation, is to learn what these invisible things might be so that you can identify it. And then when you can identify it, you can create a strategy to stop it. And so that's what we did. So again, this is very important because you don't even know this, but you could be losing 12, 20, even 30% of your sales for some reason that you have no idea what it is, right? So it's very important to talk to your customers about this, and that personal phone call, should drive that sale if you can stop that from happening. So basically, that's it. This is a quick one. Again, I just want to reiterate the whole idea here is that, linking it back to the previous customer segmentation webinar, is that these abandoned cart customers could potentially be really valuable for you. In my case, and I made this and I told this in the previous webinar, but after I used Scout for about 12 months, where I was calling every single one of my abandoned checkouts, doesn't matter how low the price point was, I called every single one and I got feedback and I learned what they needed and how I could solve their problem. And not only did I go from a 10% recovery rate when I was only using emails to going to a 55% recovery rate, which is like probably best number that I've ever heard of. And I was achieving that at 55%. The more interesting thing was, not only was I recovering more checkouts, but I was creating my best customers. So, to go back a little bit, I went and looked at my top 10 customers from the past 1 year, right? I went back, created a leaderboard, saw who my top 10 customers were in the whole history of my business. And the craziest thing was 8 out of 10 of those customers were customers that had originally abandoned their checkout, that I had reached out to, developed a one-on-one relationship with, solved their problems, earned that trust, and they knew that I could solve their problem and service their needs. And they ended up repurchasing and becoming my best category customer, my champion customers. So again, it's very important to do that, because again, like I said, I wouldn't have had 80% of my top 10 customers if I didn't contact them first. And so again, this is why Scout, using something like Scout is so important, and why, if you haven't watched the previous webinar for customer segmentation, I'd highly recommend that you watch that one, because it really just closes a loop on this one. Right? You want to have the best first impression possible, because a really good first impression will go a long way, and your customers they're more likely to become your best customers. It's even to the point where I would hope that a customer would abandon their checkout so that I could talk to them, so that I could make sure that they became best customers. then I eventually just started calling all my customers. I eventually decided, why do I have to wait for them to abandon? Why can't I just thank someone that actually bought, right? So now that my business has changed, and I don't just now call abandoned checkouts, but I call any customer that has spent over $100. I call them all, say thank you, recognize them, and just provide that post-sale customer service. So again, this whole playing defense here starts with providing really good pre-sale customer service, so you can learn and you can visibly see their players that are going for the end result of abandoned checkouts. Identify those players so that you can block them, and you block them with basically tactics like an unboxing video, proper discounts, responsive websites. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might abandon, and so to have the right things in place where you can capture those. Cool. So basically, upcoming webinars. The next one is something that I'm super passionate about. Just like this one, I guess I'm passionate about it. I wouldn't be making a webinar about them if I wasn't passionate about it. This next one it's kind of a funky, out there topic. It's about using this ancient Chinese philosophy called the I Ching, which is basically this book of change. It's this really kind of, perennial thinking, very kind of abstract concept of universal laws of just wavelengths and frequencies and the yin and yang, and using that and extrapolating some lessons from that into the customer's journey on your website. So that one's really interesting. I would definitely watch that once that launches, if I were you, which will be in a few days. Thanks so much. Take care.